do have a background in the senior care space, and so I have always made a concerted effort in digital health to make sure that we cover this topic. I don't want to say it's that overlooked anymore because we're really paying attention now, but and thanks mostly to a lot of the work that AARP and our next speaker is doing. So why don't you guys take a look at that? And while my stat of the value of the services family caregivers provide for quote unquote free when caring for older adults is estimated to be $375 billion a year. Wow. That is almost twice as much as is actually spent on home care and nursing home services combined. That's insanity. So crazy. So I'd like to welcome Jody Holtzman to the stage. He's the Senior Vice President of Market Innovation for AARP and has over 25 years experience of helping companies develop and implement competitive strategies and achieve their strategic market goals.
That's enough.
Is that enough? Do you want me to keep going? Because it's pretty impressive, but maybe he'll give you a little highlight of what he does. Okay, thanks.
All right.
It was a good bio, though.
Hi, everyone. So actually that $375 billion number is actually from a couple of years ago. The more recent is closer to 450. So in either case, rather staggering, and it does posit the lack of balance here pretty starkly. So today wanted to share with you a couple of things. One is to just pull back the corner on some data from an upgrade of our more recent study called Caregiving Innovation Frontiers, which we just punched the numbers again this year and saw how those have increased, and give you a sense of how we're thinking about caregiving and where we see both the entrepreneurial as well as larger business opportunities. So with the advent of the Affordable Care Act 6 years ago, most people have been assuming, as they've been looking at what is the direction of change in the healthcare system and how the market is going to evolve, they've been kind of basing this on, several trends. One, patient consumer-centric care, consumer engagement, focus on prevention, and this whole movement from volume to value. Going forward, if I were betting, I would say there's going to be, a continuance of that, regardless of the change in the White House and even Congress. And so when we look at caregiving in that construct, we segment it and see that it has these 6 different elements: daily essential living, health and safety awareness, care coordination, caregiver quality of life, right? Because it's not just the caregiver, care recipient, it's the caregiver as part of this dynamic. Social well-being and transition support. And each of those, and you can get this and download it, it's free, and we can, if you have trouble getting it, we can figure it out with you. Each of these categories has different elements, and the market forecast, the revenue forecast of how over the next 5 years these different segments are going to grow is actually less important than how you actually segment caregiving and think about what its core and interrelated components are. So most people think of caregiving in a pretty narrow way, and just in terms of find a caregiver, secure a caregiver, make sure that the caregiver is a good one. So, but who would have thought about transportation services or digital inclusion or home retrofits or things like that? These are all things that make continued independent living possible. And what we've seen, and looking year over year at kind of a forward-looking 5-year revenue trend, we see that this market is going to be huge, on the order of $308 billion, and that's up from our forecast last year of $279. That's the cumulative revenue over the 5 years across those six market segments. But the caregiving space also has some unique qualities that also have to be recognized, both from a services standpoint, but also from the standpoint of, are we dealing with a marketplace where it is or is not going to be easy to get paid? And this is a market which is overwhelmingly paid for out of pocket, unreimbursed. And to the tune of 80% of this forecast of 308 billion in cumulative revenue. And at the individual level, what that means is for caregivers and care recipients, per care recipient, it's a hefty piece of change. And this is for many, people that are not particularly well off and typically go paycheck to paycheck. And one of the dynamics that the data, the story wrapped around the data that Jill led with, is that all of these unpaid family caregivers, of which there are roughly 44 million, 25%, by the way, are millennials. But one of the things about them is that they self-deny out of necessity and sometimes choice. And so they're not even getting, in many cases, they are sacrificing their own potential for career growth, as well as a larger paycheck to take care of a loved one. So this $509 per year per care recipient is an important one. And from a business standpoint, it does point you to where there is a need to maybe slow that outflow of money. We're also starting to see a couple of other more interesting market developments. If somebody had come to me 3 years ago, let alone 5 years ago, and said, the top shelf of Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park, the heart of venture capitalist land, are investing chunks of change in caregiving, it would have evoked belly laughter, I believe, on my part. I mean, it would be, come on, are you serious? These are the guys doing, AI and flying to Mars and stuff like caregiving? Get real. But the fact is that when you look at the numbers that we were sharing, that when you're on the lookout for where is the next growth opportunity, this is a market in which there is incredible potential for those that figure out how to crack the nut. And now, in just the last couple of years, just 3 caregiving startups have raised over 130 million. And the investors are not chump change. Andreessen Horowitz, Oak HCFT, Kapoor Capital, others are looking. VCs come to us all the time to, say, if we were to develop kind of a focus on aging, what do you think we should? Where's the unmet need, and how does that translate? And then the last thing is that it's not just 3 companies, but there is a growing critical mass of companies focused on some aspect of caregiving across those 6 segments. That are investment worthy. And so AARP, for example, throws an annual demo day, a live pitch event. And just last year, we had 200 companies focused on some aspect of caregiving who applied to be a finalist. And of our first 40, finalists, 23 have raised over 145 million in venture capital. That's investment in companies focused on older folks. So that to us is pretty significant in terms of looking at this larger contextual shift in the market. So taking all of that where are kind of some nearer term, opportunities, and what defines them? And we see these four in particular as kind of framing, some of the areas where returns will be potentially greater and market opportunity is greater. Right now, I've always I'm a Trekkie, right? Star Trek is my touchstone for understanding the technological future, on some levels, hopefully humanity's future. But think about it. When was the first Bluetooth communicator? 1965 on the bridge of the Enterprise. Lieutenant Uhuru, played by an African-American actress, just mind-blowing at the time, wearing that thing coming out of her ear, right? First tablets, Picard reading Shakespeare in his office on a tablet, AI, we got the holodeck, and then you just talk to the computer and you have Alexa and Echo and Google Home and many more to come. And when you hear from the guys that worked on the Amazon Echo, and they will tell you that the bridge of the Enterprise was their mental model, how they talked to the computers. And now we are at a point where we're really just beginning to see the possibility of what's going to come, where all of these different things start to come together, of voice and AI and augmented reality and virtual reality and machine learning. All of these things are going to find various ways to combine. And the end result is taking the friction out of the interface with technology, which is going to spur even greater adoption, and particularly greater adoption by older people who currently can't find that little black button with a description of what it is in a 2-point font in black ink on a black background. So we won't have that anymore. Momentum in on-demand care. Honor is an example of this. The Bay Area, but growing company where to find a caregiver, your loved one is discharged in the afternoon, you were told that morning, what are you going to do? You need a caregiver like within a couple hours. Honor's trying to play that. And it's a very difficult nut to crack, but it's also an area of greater opportunity. The spread of platform as business, we see it with companies like Validic, but we see it with the Amazon Echo as well. And Amazon has smartly, I think, as did Apple with iOS, made it possible for developers to build on top of their platform. Right now, there's a startup accelerator in Seattle that is only involving companies who are building on top of the Amazon Echo. Well, that's going to we're just now going to start to see where and what the different directions are going to be that at its core leverages this ability around voice recognition and voice command. And last is this focus on reimbursement as a revenue model. And we've started to see this, with companies like Omada Health, which, was able to demonstrate the data. And so the flip side of this is if you're going to go in this direction, from the beginning, you have to be capturing data. Because somebody who's reimbursing, whether it's CMS or it's the private payers, they will pay to see cost savings to the system or to their bottom line. But you have to have the data to show it. And Omada was a good example of a company who did that. But there are other companies that also have leveraged this. A company called Able2, which is a mental health telehealth company, and actually was the first judges winner at AARP's Health Innovation at 50 Plus Live Pitch, who have raised, I think, at least 3 different rounds of venture investment, including one just about a year ago. So you look at all of these, there are current examples of who's playing in this space now, but it also is a lot of white space, and I think is going to be pretty interesting, again, irrespective of the changes that happen into the healthcare system broadly. Yep. And last, how do you talk to this group of people? What are your assumptions? If you're thinking about human-centered design, what is it about this segment of people that you should understand? Well, the first thing is you don't focus on decline, right? If you want to get somebody's ire up, talk to them about how they're falling apart. Unless it's my father. But focus on aspiration, because the fact is that regardless of age, people still have something they still want to do, defined by them as aspirational. And everybody has aspirations, so important. Old, how do you define old? Whatever your age, add 17 years. This is statistically sound. AARP years ago did research to try and understand how people define old. And the trend was, whatever your age, add 17 years. Why not 20? Why not 15? I don't know. But it came out 17 years. But the fact is that when you look in the mirror, you're not seeing old for the most part. One size does not fit all. There are currently roughly 110 million people who are over 50 years of age in the US alone. More people than most countries. You can't treat them as a single market. Add analog models to technology solutions. One of the best things that I've seen recently, and I'm going to give a shout out to the next speaker here, is that my parents have a jitterbug phone, and they can just press 0 and order a lift. They don't need an app, analog on one side, totally teched out on the back end. And that is by the company Great Call, whose CEO you will soon hear from. And lastly, everybody has a sense of dignity. Everybody has a sense of dignity. How you think about change and what it means for this group of people, and therefore the products and services you want to, sell to them. If you want to put sensors in my mother's home, have a conversation with her about how these are going to give her greater freedom, greater control, greater choice, the kinds of things that all of us want. So with that, keep an eye out across these 6 segments, and thank you very much.